Signs of the Times, Chapter 95, April 24, 1879. The great controversy between Christ and his angels and Satan and his angels. Chapter 12, continued. Jacob and Esau by Mrs. E.G. White. One reason why God does not bestow more and more larger blessings upon his people is that they would not appreciate them and render to God the things that are God's. Every Christian should often review his past life, and never should he forget the precious deliverance which God has wrought for him, supporting him in trial, consoling him in affliction, opening ways for him when all seemed dark and forbidding, refreshing him when ready to faint under discouragements. And in view of all these innumerable blessings, he should be melted and subdued, grateful and humbled. He may well exclaim, "What shall I render unto the Lord for all his benefits towards me?" The rendering to God will not be merely in words of thankfulness, but in tithes and offerings. The Christian will practice self-denial and self-sacrifice to make returns to God. The conduct of Esau in selling his birthright represents the course of the unrighteous, who consider the redemption purchased for them by Christ of little value, and sacrifice their heirship to heaven for perishable treasures. Many are controlled by inclination, and rather than deny an unhealthy appetite, they will sacrifice high and valuable considerations. If one must be yielded, the gratification of a depraved appetite, or the high and heavenly blessing which God promises only to the self-denying and God-fearing. The clamors of appetite, as in the case of Esau, will generally prevail, and for self-gratification, God and heaven will be virtually despised. Even professed Christians will use tea, coffee, snuff, tobacco, and spirits, all of which belong to the finer sensibilities of the soul. If you tell them they cannot have heaven and these hurtful indulgences, and that they should cleanse themselves from all filthiness of the flesh and spirit, perfecting holiness in the fear of God, they are offended and conclude that if the way is so straight that they cannot indulge their gross appetite, they will no longer walk therein. Especially will the corrupt passions control the mind of those who consider heaven of so little worth. Heaven will be sacrificed, the mental faculties enfeebled, and heaven will be sold for these pleasures, as Esau sold his birthright. This case is left on record as a warning to others. Esau was a reckless person. He made a solemn oath that Jacob would have his birthright. Yet, when he learned that his brother had obtained the blessing which would have belonged to him, had he not rashly sold it, he was greatly distressed. He had repented of his rash act when it was too late to remedy the matter. Thus it will be in the day of God with sinners who have battered away their heirship of heaven for selfish gratification and hurtful lust. They will then find no place for repentance, although like Esau, they may seek it carefully and with tears. Jacob was not happy in his marriage relation. Although his wives were sisters, he formed a contraction with Laban for his daughter Rachel, whom he loved, but after he had served 7 years for her, Laban, wishing to retain his faithful service a greater length of time, deceived him and gave him Leah. When Jacob realized the deception that had been practiced upon him, and that Leah had acted her part in deceiving him, he could not love her, and he reproved his father-in-law for thus trifling with his affection. Laban entreated him not to put away Leah, for this was considered a great disgrace, not only to the wife, but to the whole family. Jacob was placed in a most trying position, but he decided still to retain Leah and also to marry her sister. Yet, Leah was loved in a much less degree than Rachel. Laban was selfish in his dealing with Jacob and thought only of advantaging him by his faithful labor. Jacob would have left the artful Laban long before, but he was afraid of encountering Esau. He heard the complaint of Laban's son. Jacob had taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's had he gotten all his glory. He had gotten all his glory. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before. Jacob was greatly distressed. He knew not which way to turn. He carries his case to God and intercede for direction from him. And the Lord mercifully answered his prayer. Return unto the land of thy fathers and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. Jacob now called his two wives to the field, where there could be a secret consolation without danger of being overheard, and said, I see your father's consonance, that it is not toward me as before, but the God of my father had been with me. And he know that with all my power I have served your father. And your father had deceived me and changed my wages 10 times, but God suffered him not to hurt me. Jacob then related to them the dream given him of God to leave Laban and go on to his kindred. Rachel and Leah replied, expressing their dissatisfaction with their father's proceedings. Is there any portion of inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we counted of him as strangers? For he had sold us and had quite devoured also our money. For all the riches which had taken from our father, that is ours, and our children's. Now then, whatsoever God had said unto thee, do. Anciently, it was customary for the bridegroom to pay a sum of money according to his circumstances to the father of his wife. If he had no money, nor anything of his value, his labor was accepted for stated length of time before he could obtain the daughter as his wife. This custom was deemed a safeguard to the marriage contract. Fathers did not consider it safe to trust the happiness of their daughters to men who had not made sufficient provision to take care of a family. If they had not ability to manage business, to acquire cattle or lands, it was fair that their lives would be worthless. But the truly worthy might not become discouraged. A provision was made to test the worth of those who had nothing of value to pay for a wife. They were permitted to labor for the father whose daughter they loved. Their labors were engaged for a certain length of time, regulated by the value of the dowry required for the daughter. In doing this, marriage was not hasty, as there were opportunities to test the depth of affections of the suitor. If he was faithful in his service and was otherwise considered worthy, the daughter was given him as his wife. And generally, all the dowry the father had received was given to his daughter at his marriage. What a contrast to the course now pursued by parents and children. There are many unhappy marriages because of so much haste. Two unite their interests at the marriage altar, by most solemn vows before God, without previously weighing the matter and devoting time to sober reflection and honest prayer. Many move from impulse. They have no thorough acquaintance with the disposition of each other. They do not realize the happiness of their life is at stake. If they were wrong in this matter and their married life proves unhappy, it cannot be taken back. If they find they are not calculated to make each other happy, they must endure it as best they can. In some instances, the husband proves to be indolent to provide for a family, and his wife and children suffer. if the ability of such have been proved, as was the custom. Anciently, before marriage, much misery would have been saved. In the case of Rachel and Leah, Laban selfishly kept the dowry which should have been given to them. They have reference to this when they say, he had sold us and had quiet devoured also our money.